Canada decided that they were going to enforce the digital services tax. That was something that was passed but not enforced yet. And what it was is a 3% tax on our tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Google, by anybody in Canada who uses their service. You buy something online, you buy an ad, you pay a fee to any of these, and you're Canadian, then you're going to pay 3%. First, Donald Trump did not like Prime Minister Trudeau, who did not like Donald Trump. And he was so frustrated by the surpluses that Canada kept racking up and their unwillingness to spend the required NATO 2% of GDP investment in munitions, that he would troll Canada and say, we're the same language, the same people, we could do a lot better job than this guy. And of course, he took that very seriously, and then there was an election.
Welcome back to Expert Playback. Victor Davis Hanson calls out Canada's strategic miscalculation. When your friendliest neighbor hits you with a retro tax and then scolds you on spending cuts, you start to question the friendship. While Washington navigates trade talks, Ottawa tried to implement a retroactive tax bill worth billions, convinced Washington will just smile and pay. In this episode, we're tracking how leverage becomes liability for Carney when Trump loses patience.
There's about $1.5 trillion of total trade between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And if you look at it, most of that growth and wealth is in the United States. Mexico runs about 3 times the surplus that Canada does with us, about $171 billion per year. They have about $20 billion going to their cartels that diffuses through the economy, and they get $63 billion in remittances on top of the $171 billion in trade. There's only 8 of the 32 nations about that have not met their 2% obligation. Canada's one of them, but it's one of the least cooperative of the 32 nations. In other words, it only spends 1.37% of its GDP on defense. It won't kick in another $40 billion to help arm it. And you could make the argument that it depends on the United States. It looks at that if there's any hostile activity, cartels, they're down there in Mexico with the United States between them. And nobody is going to proverbially mess with Canada when the United States has it under its nuclear shield, Alaska, early warnings, you name it.
$1.5 trillion in trade sounds like harmony until you open the ledger. Both neighbors profit massively from American markets while underfunding the security umbrella that makes trade possible. It's what Victor calls the strategic freeloading paradox. Cash flowing south through remittances, north through energy sales, but defense spending? Dead last among NATO allies. When your biggest customer is also your security guarantor, that's not sustainable economics. It's borrowed time.
They're running up at $63 billion with their trade surplus with their partner. And most of it is because they have a thick sulfurous crude oil that's in the middle of the country. And it's very convenient for them to go right across the border and sell it to us. And we like it, and we can refine it. We have the refineries that can deal with that type of difficult crude. It'd be very difficult for them to send it all the way to their east or west ports and make the same profit. 95% of their oil comes to us. We're a good customer, in other words. Why would they not then say, we'll try to import more poultry, cheese, agricultural products? We can't get down to zero, but we can cut the trade surplus by 20 or 30 billion. You're our neighbor, but they didn't do that. So bottom line, why is Mr. Carney trying to rub salt in these very painful wounds that we've been going through the last few months by initiating a retroactive, kind of a bill of attainder tax? And if that goes through, believe me, the Europeans will follow suit. Why would Ms. Sheinbaum start saying to us that taxing 2 or 3%, that's what the Senate version is, maybe 4 or 5 in the House, that's unacceptable to Mexico? Or why would she weigh in on the LA riots and say that she's going to protect Mexican nationals? If you're going to protect Mexican nationals, the best thing you could do is say, come home, we want you.
Canada's prosperity rides on U.S. refineries willing to process crude no one else can handle. Yet former Bank of Canada Chief Mark Carney targets U.S. firms with a bill of attainder tax and cheers Europe to pile on. Not to be outdone, Mexico's President-elect Claudia Sheinbaum inserts herself into Los Angeles riots, pledging to shield Mexican nationals. Never mind the cartels pushing fentanyl across the same line. It's political theater that mistakes customer patience for weakness, a dangerous miscalculation that could reshape North American relations permanently.
So he instead whipped up, it was very successful to whip up Canadian nationalism, very successful to win that election. But then where do you go from that? You go and see Donald Trump and you want to just say, we're not going to be a 51 state, we're not going to be a 51 state. Does he really believe that the majority of people in Congress are going to vote to admit Canada? Nobody wants to do that. So what am I getting at? He could have had a statesman-like message both during the election and when he saw Trump. He could have said this: Donald Trump is trolling us. We're friends with the United States. He's trying to needle us so that we spend more money on NATO and we lower our surplus, which is growing very big. And we're going to do that. We're going to negotiate. Don't take him serious. He's just doing this like he did to Panama. We're good friends. He kids us, we kid him. But he didn't do that. He tried to whip it up and it was successful. But once you whip it up and you get that hostility, then you've got to go deal with him. And then you've got to tell him, I'm not going to spend $40 billion on our defense. We're going to subsidize you on defense. And we're not going to lower that. So that's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Carney's nationalism may score points on the CBC, but it collides with a United States that can pump its own oil, mill its own timber, and onshore its own factories, especially under a president who measures friendship in fair trade and shared risk. Hanson's verdict: Canada and Mexico are playing with fire, convinced Washington will always blink first. When greater powers recalculate relationships, smaller partners discover their leverage was always borrowed. The real showdown won't be with America. It will be Ottawa and Mexico City scrambling for the last seat at the table.
Why would she weigh in this very contentious period in Los Angeles? Disruptive. We have the Olympics coming. We have Mexican nationals spitting, burning on the American flag, waving the Mexican. Don't weigh in. What would be the solution? We don't have a solution, but they are playing with fire. I have a solution. Maybe we could take Mexico and put it next to Canada and let them fight it out with each other and keep us out of it.
If you found this breakdown helpful, hit that like button so more people see it. And if you want more sharp takes on global power plays, go ahead and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.